It's not every day that folks in London, Ontario wake up to find they have an Oscar nominee in their midst. But it happened last week when the film adaptation of Emma Donoghue's novel Room grabbed 4 Academy Award nominations, including one for the writer herself. And Emma Donoghue joins us now via Skype from Nice, France for more. We've had you on this program before a few times, but never as an Academy Award nominee, Emma. Fantastic news. Congratulations. How did you get the news?
Strangely enough, Steve, I got it on live radio. The BBC had cruelly scheduled me to be interviewed just when the nomination news was breaking. So I was all prepared with my, politest face on. I was going to be perfectly cordial about all those lucky nominees. And instead, I heard my name being read out. And so I had to give my raw glee to the BBC.
And how did you react when you got the news from the Beeb?
Oh, I was absolutely thrilled. We'd all had a strong hope of Brie Larson getting nominated as Best Actress as the young mother in Room, but we really didn't think we'd get anything else. So to be nominated for screenplay and for Best Director for Lenny Abrahamson and Best Picture above all, that's really the one that makes or breaks a film's fortune, or rather, makes the film's fortunes. It was just extraordinary.
Have you had a chance, all of you, to celebrate yet?
Well, the perverse thing about success nowadays is that it leads to constant interviews. So you don't have a huge amount of free time. But I do several times a day suddenly think, wow, I'm nominated for an Oscar. So I would say I've been in a mood of high excitement ever since it happened.
Needless to say, this film is not Star Wars, right? This is in some respects a small story, and it's very tenderly and beautifully told. But there's no wild special effects and computer-generated this, that, and the other thing in this movie. So why do you think it's managed to capture so much attention despite not having all of that sis-boom-ba?
Who needs them, I say? Who needs special effects? Who needs big-budget car chases? They do not touch the heart. I've seen a lot of grown men cry after watching this film. I think all you need to really, really move people is impeccable acting and impeccable production values. It doesn't have to be on a huge scale. This is a fairly low-budget film. It's an Irish-Canadian co-production. No big studios were involved. There's nothing Hollywood about it. But I think it really, really works. I think Lenny Abrahamson, my fellow Dubliner, did the most exquisite job. A mostly Canadian cast. And we filmed it in Toronto, and it's just beautiful. I feel I can say that myself because the screenplay is really only one element. I feel it's really Lenny's film. So I feel wonderful that we're up there competing with these huge budget films by much more established talents.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because if you didn't, I would have. I've seen it, and I thought it was fantastic. But tell me, while you were writing the novel, did it ever occur to you in the midst of it that, this might make a pretty good screenplay too?
Not in the midst of it. I mean, I love the novel form so much that when I'm in it, I don't want to be anywhere else. I love the fact that novels have time for everything. Every little thought that goes through your head, there's room for it in there somewhere. A film is so different. But as soon as I finished writing the novel, I did think, this story of a strange little boy locked up in a shed thinking it's the whole world, that could be a strong enough story to hold a cinema audience too. So I thought I would go ahead and write it myself before anybody could try and dissuade me.
And needless to say, she who writes the novel is not always she who gets to adapt it for the screen. How fortunate did you think you were that you actually got the chance to do that?
Well, I was in a great position in that I had the rights to the book, which quite a few people wanted. So there's a lot to be said for just saying, I'm the writer of this film and here's my screenplay. Can we work together? That was the basis on which I began. And luckily, the Irish company who approached me were happy to proceed that way. They were very collaborative. And then I said, please, can we make it in Canada where I live? So it became an amazing kind of co-venture between the film industries of my two homelands. It feels like an amazing kind of coming together of the puzzle pieces of my past.
Now, I'm probably oversimplifying this, but when you're writing a novel, you are really putting things in. And when you adapt for the screen, I think you are really pulling things out of the story in some respects because you can't get it all in there. How'd you do that? Absolutely
true. Absolutely true. For instance, the Hollywood Reporter just asked me to talk about one piece from the book which became a piece in the film. And I realized that it was a long, chatty scene in the book which contained 2 words. The concept of a good enough mother. There's a moment in the book when Ma talks about, was she good enough? And I realized that I took those 2 words and I turned them into a tiny little scene towards the end of the film in which Ma asks Jack, she says to Jack, I'm not a good enough Ma. And he simply says, but you're Ma. You know, children don't really ask, are we any good or bad? They simply are attached to us because we are their familiar ones, their parents. So that would be an example of the kind of extreme, not just condensing, but sometimes taking a bit of material from one bit of the book and moving it to quite another place and quite another context where it happens to fit. Because film has a very different time imperative. It needs to flow onwards.
Now, when you created these characters, Emma, they were clearly in your mind, in your imagination. But then when they made the movie, you actually got to see them for real. Can you tell me what that was like when you first saw the picture?
It was just wonderful because a book necessarily concentrates a bit more on what's in people's minds, even if you've got plenty of description of their bodies. And a child, a 5-year-old child, is so much his body. You know, children have such distinctive, gangly, awkward, but beautiful ways of moving. So to see Jack not just given voice, but embodied by young Jacob Tremblay from Vancouver is just extraordinary. And we were so lucky to find Jacob because he's tiny, so he looks genuinely young, and he looks quite androgynous, especially with the long hair. But he was just turning 8 when we started filming, so he had all the, you know, the sense and the nous and the intelligence to respond to Lenny Abrahamson's very tactful direction. So I think he was the kind of ideal age and the ideal kind of sensitivity and intelligence.
And again, when you actually saw the actors who were selected to play those parts that you created, did the actors and the way they created the characters on the screen look like what you had imagined when you created them to begin with?
You know, I hadn't really pictured the characters much because the narrator in the book is a 5-year-old boy, and they hardly ever comment on anybody's face or clothes, you know. They concentrate on the stuff that people do and say and how they play with you. So I didn't have a very strongly visual sense of the characters, and I didn't care what they looked like. For instance, Joan Allen, as soon as she was cast, the part of the grandmother started to change, because in the book, the grandmother is kind of rather harried and a little bit vulgar and makes lots of mistakes. And as soon as we'd cast the graceful, intellectual, incredibly sensitive Joan Allen, you know, that the part just shunted upwards in nobility. It just began altering, but that was fine because, you know, the grandmother in the film plays a much more central role than in the books, so everything had to change. I mean, basically, you should only adapt your own novel into a film if you are embracing the change.
Now, you said when we cast the picture, does that to say that you had a hand in picking who got to play the roles?
I had a hand in everything because I never turned that hand into a fist. You know, I was foolish. I would have been very foolish to try and abuse my power by insisting on anything. But we were a very small, chummy little group, you know. Element Pictures is a small company, and they agreed to work with me very much in partnership to develop this rather than just buying the rights outright. So I got to be in on all the discussions, but no, I didn't have the final say in anything. But I loved being just part of the discussion on everything from design to casting to locations. You know, it was real teamwork.
Now, it's interesting you say you had a hand in it, and thankfully you didn't have to turn that into a fist. But what would you have gone to the wall over if the producers or the director or the actors had really had a fundamental disagreement with you on one particular thing?
That's quite a morbid question, but it's a good one. I went into the project thinking, okay, if anyone tries to change the ending, say kill off the mother, I will completely freak out. Or if anyone, let me see, if they'd suddenly provided Ma with a convenient boyfriend in the final scene, I think that exam would have been absurd. And I remember saying to Lenny, you have to promise to keep the breastfeeding in. I mean, it's pretty subtle in the film, but he did not cut it. He just made it, you know, subtle in the way that it is when a 5-year-old breastfeeds. So I knew from the start that Lenny was the kind of uncompromising filmmaker who was not going to bow to commercial pressures here. He never talked about changing things to make the film sell in any way. And I think his courage is really paying off now.
Emma, let's finish up on this. You're in France right now. What are you doing there?
My partner is a professor at Westerns, so she's on her sabbatical researching in France. And, you know, we like to plunge our kids into a totally French-speaking environment every now and then to make them proper bilingual, good Canadians.
Now, you're a long way from Hollywood, but do you plan to go to the ceremony?
Yes, in fact, I've been going to LA regularly with the 9-hour time gap. But that's okay. I get to watch a lot of films on the plane.
Have you ever been to the Oscars before?
Never. Are you kidding? I'm just a novelist. We barely even need to put on any makeup to do our readings, you know. I mean, it's a very low glam world. So suddenly to be in the film world and have groomers coming to my hotel room, you know, it's faintly absurd, and I'm enjoying every minute of it because it may only happen once.
I guess you're going to have to pick some, and I mean, forgive me, I just don't know this stuff, but Oscar de la Renta or some kind of big name that you're going to have to wear now and do the red carpet?
I'm not discussing the dress, no. I like to discuss films. I'm not a film star, and there's no way we're discussing my fashion choices on TVO.
Well, good for you. Listen, we can't congratulate you enough, not only on the Oscar nomination, but you got 11, I think, nominations for the Canadian Screen Awards as well, which is just so wonderful.
I'm so chuffed about that. I know, because I really wanted this to be a Canadian film, and it's full of fantastic Canadian talent and great crew. So to see that reflected in the Canadian Screen Awards, I can't wait, and I really want to go to those ones too.
I suspect there will be 35 million Canadians cheering for you on the 28th of February. Good luck, Emma. Great to have you on TVO again.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.